Abortion is a very controversial topic. We interviewed several people to hear their views on this particular subject. In 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that laws against abortion violated a constitutional right to privacy. This case was called Roe v. Wade. Many people still have strong opinions on both sides of this issue.
Unintended pregnancies, which occur approximately 50% of the time, when you consider that almost 50% of pregnancies are unintended, that's an incredible number. And roughly half of those, sometimes even more, can go on to have women decide to go on and not continue that pregnancy. Then we really obviously need to focus on prevention.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm actually against abortion, but what I am against is some basic principles that this nation was founded upon. What we base our communities on is some of the basic standards were given to us by our forefathers, and one being such the right to life and the right to liberty and freedom and happiness, the pursuit of happiness. And I think that right to life and all that happiness that's involved is also there for those who are unborn.
I think that that's kind of a complicated topic. I think in an ideal situation that someone of that age would hopefully be able to communicate with their parents and have an honest, trusting relationship. But I think there are issues of abuse, sexual abuse, and things of that nature where it isn't always an option that someone can go to their parents.
I think there's a lot of legislation needed, but it's not legislation to regulate abortion. It's legislation to increase access to education on how to prevent pregnancy. It's legislation that is needed to support women who choose to carry their pregnancy to term. Right now, state dollars or taxpayers pay for 53% of all births in the state of Indiana because women can't afford to have babies on their own or they don't have access to health insurance. So the kind of legislation that we need is legislation that will prevent abortion. There are enough regulations. Abortion is the most regulated medical procedure in the United States, and Indiana is no exception to that. There are 50 pages of laws and regulations governing abortion, but Indiana recently ranked 49th in the United States, almost dead last on its efforts to prevent unintended pregnancy and to help women plan their families. So we need a lot of legislation, but we need legislation that will reduce the need for abortion, not legislation that will further regulate it.
That's a very difficult moral dilemma, where we have one individual being penalized for the death of an unborn child as a result of their misdeed, drunk driving, a grossly negligent act, and then trying to compare that to the act of an abortion or a late-term abortion or what's referred to as a partial birth abortion. I think that there is absolutely no medical nor moral justification for partial birth abortion because in order to perform that particular type of an abortion, you actually have to have a vaginal birth of the child in order to perform it. So, in fact, in the state of Indiana, if I'm not mistaken, that is actually illegal. That is not even an option. As are other late-term abortions in the state of Indiana are also illegal, anything past the first trimester. So, in my earlier discussion on abortion, abortion's a moral component that I feel very strongly that you don't have the right to have anybody outside all of those individuals involved having any direct influence. And it's really a difficult decision not only for the mother, for the father or boyfriend and the family involved. And when we start looking at manslaughter charges or murder charges as a result of an automobile accident when an unborn child is infected, it calls into question a lot of the things that we do as it relates to abortion. But I think the one thing it clearly emphasizes is that late-term abortions are without justification. And if they're performed, then that is a shortcoming of society on a moral ground. And we should talk not only with our legislature, but on a national level to completely ban late-term abortions, because it's difficult for me to balance punishing one individual for the death of an unborn child and not punishing another when the child could have been the exact same age. It could have been in its 8th month, 7th month, 6th month when it was killed in the automobile accident, and that's a prime time for a late-term partial birth abortion. So it's a very difficult question to try to put an answer to, and it's a very difficult thing to get your hands around morally. And I think that we're not going to come up with an answer, not in the short term, not until the moral fiber of the country is changed and we start recognizing life as something sacred, and we start acting accordingly.
In most of medicine, if you're under 18, you do need to have parental permission or consent to be treated. When you apply that problem to abortion, or that question to abortion, it can be a little bit even more challenging because, in my opinion, I think it would be a good idea for any woman or girl who finds herself pregnant to be able to make that decision for herself.
I personally am opposed to abortion. It's not something that I would ever recommend to someone because of the mental and physical repercussions of an abortion, but I don't believe it's something that government has any position being involved in. I don't believe they should fund it. I don't believe that beyond the medical aspects of the procedure that they should regulate it. That's a decision between an individual, their spouse, their boyfriend, their parents, and their physician.
Would I say that if I cut off the tip of my finger, is that murder? No. It's losing a bit of my tissue. And to me, that's what, when you lose an embryo through an abortion, that's, from my opinion, that's not murder. It can be very therapeutic, both emotionally and medically for a woman sometimes.
To oppose such a statute, the court said, would be to permit the state to impose its view of the nature of a fetus upon those who have the constitutional right to base an important decision in their personal lives upon a different view. Again, this is a very special type case for the women because of the very nature of the injury involved. It is an irreparable injury. Once pregnancy has started, certainly this is not the kind of injury that can be later adjudicated. It is not the kind of injury that can later be compensated by some sort of monetary reward.
I guess I would say I'm pro-life. I believe in your right as a U.S. citizen to be born. And I think the courts already proved that that person inside of you is worth something, because if they can put you in prison for 30 years or convict you of a homicide, I think it's already proven in the courts, and I think it just needs to be reinterpreted.